From his vast collection, it was not difficult for Mr. Hoppy to find just the tortoise he wanted. He wanted one that weighed 15 ounces exactly on his kitchen scales, no more and no less. When he had got it, he put it on the kitchen table beside Alfie, and even he could hardly tell that one was bigger than the other. But it was bigger. It was bigger by 2 ounces. This was tortoise number 2. Mr. Hoppy took tortoise number 2 out onto the balcony, gripped it in the claws of his tortoise catcher. Then he lowered it onto Mrs. Silver's balcony right beside a nice, fresh lettuce. Tortoise number 2 had never eaten tender, juicy lettuce leaves before. It had only had thick, old cabbage leaves. It loved the lettuce and started chomping away at it with great gusto. There followed a rather nervous 2 hours' wait for Mrs. Silver to return from work. Would she see any difference between the new tortoise and Alfie? It was going to be a tense moment. Out onto her balcony swept Mrs. Silver. "Alfie, my darling," she cried out, "Mommie's back. Have you missed me?" Mr. Hoppy, peering over his railing, but well hidden between 2 huge potted plants, held his breath. The new tortoise was still chomping away at the lettuce. My, Alfie, you do seem hungry today," Mrs. Silver was saying. "It must be Mr. Hoppy's magic words. I've been whispering to you." Mr. Hoppy watched as Mrs. Silver picked the tortoise up and stroked his shell. Then she fished Mr. Hoppy's piece of paper out of her pocket, and holding the tortoise very close to her face, she whispered, reading from the paper, "Essio trod, teg rigib, emok no essio trod, warg poo, fup poo, toos poo, nerps poo, wool poo, lose poo, ergrog, elzug, foots, plug, toop no taff, essio trot, toop no taff, tegno, elbog doof." Mr. Hoppy popped his head out of the foliage and called out, "Well, good evening, Mrs. Silver. How is Alfie tonight?" "Oh, he's lovely," Mrs. Silver said, looking up and beaming, "and he's developing such an appetite. I've never seen him eat like this before. It must be the magic words." "You never know," Mr. Hoppy said darkly. "You never know." Mr. Hoppy waited 7 whole days before he made his next move. On the afternoon of the 7th day, when Mrs. Silver was at work, he lifted tortoise number 2 from the balcony below, brought it into his living room. Number 2 had weighed exactly 15 ounces. He must now find one that weighed exactly 17 ounces.